The FBI offers help as suspicions grow of a bomb on board the Russian airliner which crashed in Egypt. The Kremlin says it's too early to conclude what caused last week's disaster. Cairo complains of a lack of intelligence sharing. So where does the truth lie and what politics are at play? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. It has been 8 days now since a Russian airliner crashed in Egypt, killing all 224 passengers and crew on board. Since then, there's been leaks, rumours, speculation and accusations. FBI agents in the United States have agreed to help with forensic analysis after Russian investigators made a rare appeal for assistance. Is that a sign of the challenges facing investigators or sharing geopolitical interests? Egypt is feeling isolated from the US and the UK, who say intelligence chatter points strongly to a bomb on board. On Saturday, a week after the crash, Egyptian investigators spoke to the media but resisted the bomb theory.
Debris is scattered over a wide area, more than 13 kilometers in length, which is consistent with an in-flight breakup. Some parts of the wreckage are missing, and it is hoped to locate them in the incoming days. A noise was heard in the last second of the CVR recording. A spectral analysis will be carried out by specialized labs in order to identify the nature of this noise.
Egypt's foreign minister complained that Western governments have failed to share intelligence and accused them of concentrating on their own self-interests.
The information we've got about the incident have not yet been shared with the Egyptian security agencies with any details, and this is a question mark that we should ask as well, because we're the most involved party when it comes to this issue. We're expecting more technical information to be provided to us instead of spreading it in a casual way on various media outlets.
Well, thousands of British tourists remain stranded in Sharm El Sheikh and could be stuck there for another 3 days. All UK-bound flights from the Egyptian resort were halted on Wednesday. Britons are being allowed to fly home, but with hand luggage only. Baggage checked in will be flown back separately in the next week. Russia, too, have suspended all flights. 80,000 Russians are thought to be on holiday in Egypt now. Let's bring in our guests. Joining me here in Doha is Martin Reardon, Senior Vice President of the Soufan Group in Oxford. Igor Sutyagin, Senior Research Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. He joins us via Skype. And in Washington, D.C., Oliver McGee, aviation specialist and former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary for Transportation. Welcome to all three of you. Good to have you with us. Martin Reardon, you were a former FBI man. Talk us through the significance of the FBI being called in.
Well, I think it's very significant. The FBI laboratory, the Bomb Data Center, has along with their British counterparts, probably have the most experience worldwide in investigating terrorist bombings, be they on the ground or in aircraft. So this is significant. It's a very capable laboratory with agents and analysts that have literally decades of experience doing just this.
Igor Sutyagin, how do you see this call by the Russians, both from a practical point of view and a political point of view?
Well, I think in practical point of view, it just attempt to concentrate efforts, because there are good specialists in Russia as well in explosives, but it's always better to have more specialists. In this sense, that is quite understandable. The desire to get some assistance from the highly trained, highly experienced American colleagues, it's great, it's good. Politically, it is very interesting, because that is the extremely rare occasion when Vladimir Putin steps back from his political line, because his point was there is no terror threat to Russia as the result of our involvement in Syria, and so I promise you bloodless war. he spectacularly failed on this, because this is not only bloodless, that is lots of blood, and that is the situation when not military dying. After all, they signed to risk their life and maybe even die. These are civilians dying, and these civilians are, well, they are viewers. They signed to just to view these nice American-style pictures on TV, how Russian aviation remotely attack Daesh without any risk to Russia and Russian forces.
So why do you think he's stepping back, other than the fact that civilians are dying? No leader wants that to happen. But to be pushed to this point, knowing the man that he is, what do you think it is that he knows?
Well, it seems that he does know. Finally, his professionals persuaded him to admit that the threat is very serious, because Vladimir Putin dived into this conflict, and he openly admitted that on 10th of October, that he did not make any difference between Shia and Sunni. He did not know any details about this conflict. And so he just overlooked and underestimated the seriousness of the enterprise he undertook. And now his specialists, his own professionals, told him that, look, Vladimir Vladimirovich, it's time to take it really seriously. And that is why he's taking that. That is why he is persuaded that it is the terrorist, retaliation attack against Russia.
Oliver McGee, I'm interested to know what you think about the conversation that's happening at the moment between the US and the FBI and Russia.
Well, right now we're in the politics of international aviation disaster. An aircraft is essentially a controlled bomb, and when we have speculations that there is an ignition device somewhere in the vicinity of the cargo bay, that controlled bomb becomes uncontrolled, and that is getting into the geopolitics and the conversation that is taking place. Everything that we're talking about across the media is speculative until the French completes its complete analysis of those black boxes. And more importantly, we get more definitive information about the noise in the spectral analysis, which is essentially a mathematical model of frequency domains across noise. And basically, we're trying to figure out where the noise is coming from, what is the extent of it, and get some more information definitively what happened in this crash. Make no bones about it, the International Aviation Security Conference held in Dublin is really saying, last month in Dublin, is saying we need to move from 9/11 protocols of aviation security and bring it up 14 years later to 2015, and even 10 years from now beyond in 2025, where we can really start using advances in information technology, biotechnologies, microtechnologies, to be able to determine what do we mean by aviation safety and security today as opposed to 9/11. 9/11 was really focused on the passengers who get into the aircraft, but right now we need to bring the protocols of aviation security across all airlines above a common denominator to this new front. With this crash and following MH17, we got aircraft now being blown out of the sky. So we really need to be more visionary and vigilant in how we look at what we mean by aviation safety and security in 2015 and beyond.
Martin, while the investigation goes on and everyone's speculating about what happened, it's been very interesting watching the politics at play and listening to what Igor is saying, what's happening on the Russian front. Mm-hmm. What do you make of the way it's been played out at the moment, the conversations between the UK and the US, and bringing Russia in, but towards the end?
This is not surprising. The U.S. and Britain, of course, very close, long-standing intelligence sharing relationship, but with Russia also, and I'll speak from first-hand experience. When you have credible and actionable intelligence, it doesn't matter who it is that needs to be passed. The United States, the UK, they're going to pass that information, be it to Russia, to China, to any country, to stop a terrorist attack. So the theories that or speculation that intelligence was withheld, I don't believe that. I've seen firsthand where that information is shared with the Russians, and when the Russians share credible and actual information with the United States and Britain.
All right, you're talking about who has been sharing information, but you didn't mention Egypt. Egypt is complaining that they haven't had information shared. Surely that's the big question. Why leave them out? I mean, they're victims here.
Again, the information that's coming up, the intelligence, is chatter. after the fact chatter for the most part. Simply it's voice or other communication intercepts where there is either messages or voice data showing that there was possibly a terrorist attack. That's what it is. Or going back and looking at data that was captured prior to the attack and analyzing it. There's so much data that's taken real time, it can't be analyzed until after the fact. I don't doubt that this is being shared with the Egyptian intelligence services. And again, the United States and Egypt have a very long-standing intelligence relationship. Very, very long-standing, very close. If there is information there, it is being shared with the Egyptians.
You seem to be agreeing with that, Oliver.
Yes, I think the intelligence community is an information sharing community, and I wholeheartedly agree with your guest on that.
So why do you think the Egyptians said that they were being left out of the loop here?
I think they want to be more transparent and disclosing to a wanting public, particularly given that ICAO requires that they be upfront on the investigation and in front of the investigation, because that's where the crash occurred. So they're really trying to be more vigilant in doing that. But information is always a necessary commodity in an aircraft crash. And they're really looking for more and more and more so they can be able to make timely disclosures of what's going on here. But clearly, again, they have to wait for the French BEA services to do the black box analysis, because that's ultimately going to be the definitive answer to everyone as to exactly what happened on this crash.
I'm going to use your word up front and put this to you, Igor. When you look at the UK and the US, for example, they were very quick in saying, we have suspicions, we fear for our people who are there, we're going to stop flights, and we're going to do some sort of damage control. Yet we saw reluctance from both Russia and Egypt. Why is that? What does it say about the way they behave, or possibly when it comes to information sharing with the people who live in their countries?
Well, the problem is that both Egypt and Russia are a bit less democratic than United Kingdom and United States. And so that means that leaders of these countries are a bit less accountable to their own people. And that means that they put their political interests and political goals slightly above interests of their people. That is why they do, when they valued the political damage to their country and to economic damage in the Egyptian case, against the lives of their people, they probably, for some period of time, they probably valued their political interests more than lives of their people. For instance, in Russia, there were its long record of terrorist attacks when it was the government responsible to the very large extent for deaths of its own citizens. In 2002, for instance, it was the capture of theater in the center of Moscow. And it was the security services attack which killed more than 130 people. Then 2 years later, it was capture of school in south of Russia. And it was, unfortunately, government forces attack which led to death of more than 330 people. So that is a tradition in Russia. And the problem is that it is undermining. If Putin had admitted a week ago that it was a terrorist attack, that would undermine his policy that it's this bloodless war.
When it comes to political fallout, Oliver, I'm wondering how this is being perceived in the US as far as foreign policy is concerned. Obviously, there's speculation as to what brought the plane down, and if it is indeed ISIL, the main suspects, is it because of involvement in Syria and Iraq? Is this likely to have an impact on US foreign policy now?
I believe basically we are cautious here in the U.S. because we really need to do detailed analysis before we really begin to speculate further on any types of terrorist concerns. Usually the United States is very, very cautious about reporting openly on these things until the accurate information and data is in. With the FBI looking and helping in the investigation, that's a good thing. With the NTSB probably looking at this as well, the FAA. These are experts that will be coming in to add into the conversation that's taking place in the investigation with the French BEA, because ultimately Once we know what happened with the crash, we will be able to determine what's going on more accurately in the geopolitics associated with this global aviation security threat.
Martin, your reading of the geopolitics associated with this, and if it is indeed a bomb, I mean, this is almost on the scale of 9/11 in the fact that innocent people have been targeted on such a massive scale.
It is. And this is the biggest terrorist attack outside of a conflict zone since 9/11. But it just goes to prove the terrorist organization, if it was a terrorist attack, with the persistence, with innovation, you're eventually going to get an IED onto that aircraft. Whether, and I don't think it's the likely avenue for that is people who have access to the airplane, not so much the passenger luggage or the passenger bringing it on. I think since 2009, aviation security is getting around that, but it's that human element. Individuals, whether they're maintenance crews, the caterers, the cleaning crews, cargo personnel who are loading the aircraft, a lot of people have unsupervised or unchecked access to these aircraft, and that's really the vulnerable point, that human element.
Yeah, Oliver, how do you deal with that human element now? I mean, you can't lock down airports any more than they're already locked down, can you?
Well, I think, as your guest suggested, we're going to have to begin to start looking at more military operations on commercial passenger aircraft. I was coming to the studio today and talking with a very concerned passenger for the travel of her son. It's my neighbor. And she's really, really interested in finding out, is it really safe to travel internationally? Passengers are going to have to be visionary and vigilant in planning their travel and selecting airlines and selecting areas in which they are going in around the world. And more importantly, right now, we're swashing people. We're going image technologies. We're actually doing physical frisking of passengers above the cargo bay, but down below the cargo bay, we're not really going into looking at who is the staff involved, where's the screening involved in that, who is in the cargo bay access, because that's another entry point into the aircraft. And as I said in the beginning of the hour, an aircraft is a controlled bomb. So when you're putting ignition devices in the luggage cargo bay near the fuel source, you're going to have a very, very loud and catastrophic explosion. And these types of events are very, very strong security threats since 9/11. So this is a new look at how we look at aviation safety and security. When we set those protocols in 9/11, we didn't expect them to last for 25 years. The technology changes and the terrorists are getting smarter. So we have to get much more smarter in being in front of them and controlling this. And that is involving screening of background checks and humans who are involved with access to the aircraft.
Igor, whoever it is, it's quite a message to both Russia and Egypt right now, and those traveling on their planes. What do you think the ripple effect will be within Russia?
Well, the first effect in Russia is that the amount of trips brought to Egypt dropped 30 to 50%. People are frightened, actually. And that is very unusual, because on previous occasions when something like that happened, while not with Russian planes and Russian tourists, the first question which was asked, well, okay, how much you decreased price now? So now people value their lives much more than before. That is the first point. And the second is that there is still some underground noise in Russia. People start questioning whether the government really does everything what it must do to the nation. That is the effect. I do not think that there will be any influence, any implications for the current political line of the Russian government in Syria. I think that the operation will carry out as before, but in the longer term, that might create some certain difficulty for the Kremlin.
And I guess the guess, and obviously this is projecting ahead, but what Putin will do, how Putin will respond if it is indeed ISIL. Is it something, will he give more support to Assad or align himself closer to the US?
Well, he's already providing more support to Assad, because the intensity of Russian airstrikes increased, well, nearly 1.5 times over last week. So that is more serious, but I do not think that that is directly connected to this specific tragedy. Because as I said in all previous occasions, Vladimir Putin did not react to the terrorist attack. So he kept doing as he did before. So that is why I do think that in the foreign policy terms, that is not strong enough factor to push the Kremlin closer to the United States, while any cooperation, any joint analysis of the situation will be welcomed, because that is, after all, additional factor which is breaking through the isolation, which is one of the goals of the Kremlin. But in general, in the short term, I do not expect any changes.
Martin, from an intelligence point of view, why has the UK been so quick to take this up? I mean, they didn't lose anybody, so what's happening there? They seem to be ahead of the FBI as well in this case.
I won't say they're ahead, they're right there. No, in Egypt was also, this comes down to tourism and the economy for Egypt, and that is supported not only by many Russians, many other Europeans, but a great deal of British nationals that go there. So the UK has definitely an interest on security in Egypt, and they work very closely with Egyptian authorities. So that's the reason. The U.S. involvement in this is, yes, no Americans were there. It's not as popular a resort place for Americans. In fact, I would say, unless they live in the region, they're probably not going to go to Sharm El Sheikh. But aviation security internationally, if this is a new way of getting a device on, or a new type of bomb, or this is the first successful aviation attack since 9/11, that's significant. And I mean,
the reality is that you have planes blowing up over major cities, potentially anywhere in the world now.
It could. And again, is that vulnerable element, is that human element, is what terrorists are going to exploit. Whether it's paying somebody to come onto your side, or they sympathize with your ideals or your ideology, and for that reason they're going to support you. It's that human element. That's the vulnerability. It could be anywhere in Europe, it could be anywhere in the Middle East, in Asia, in Africa, anywhere in North America, finding that vulnerable point on the flight line.
And in the meantime, until we know what happened, Oliver, what we've been getting from all quarters are leaks. Are these intentional? What purpose do they serve?
I don't know if we really have intentional leaks, but we do very, very much have a hot media that is interested in talking about a spectacular crash. The same thing occurred in MH370. The same thing occurred in MH17. Anytime you have an aircraft blowing out of the sky, the media is going to go after it like magnets. And every piece of information becomes a valuable piece for a story. But be that as it may, the facts and evidence have to be in front of this. The experts have to step in front and always be up front on this. I'm an expert in the field. I am beginning to step up personally to make sure that I'm available for international aviation security conferences, all kinds of ways to be able to put forth new advances in technology that we really need to get in front of this.
Can we say, though, categorically it is a bomb now?
Not yet. Because you see the words, they're probable or alleged or possibilities, because they need to complete the spectral analysis. The French need to do the full analysis of the black box. And I have been very, very cautious about putting forth writing on that to be definitive until we see exactly what's going on in that black box. Then we will know. We know exactly what happened in the black box in MH17, and so we were able to define that problem. Now we needed to get in front of this, because international aviation safety and security is an integrated global enterprise, just like the geopolitics is, just like the global media is. So once we understand what happened from the French BEA, then we'll all be able to settle down and then be able to get forth to really improve aviation security, because that's a public interest across the international fronts. Commercial passenger travel has to be safe.
Martin, I can't imagine leaders speculating about it being a bomb if there are not real suspicions that it is indeed a man-made device. I mean, go ahead. I was just going to say,
and I think Oliver hit on this very well. It's probable. When you look at everything that happened that we know right now, each day it looks more and more like a terrorist attack and less like a catastrophic failure of the aircraft itself. But again, until the investigation is complete, it could be weeks, it could be months, it may be never. We may not know definitively.
And the longer it takes, I should imagine, the more they get bolstered, if it is indeed a bomb. Gentlemen, very good to talk to all three of you. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Martin Reardon, Igor Sutyagin, and Oliver McGee. Thank you. And thank you for watching. As always, you can leave your comments on the program's page of our website, aljazeera.com. And you can post your views on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. Thanks for watching. For me, Jane Dutton, the rest of the team. Bye for now.